So the last thing that the muhaddithin, rahimahullah, did to quell this surge of fabrication and all of the doubt that occurred because of the environment is they formulated what's called Muṣṭalaḥul Ḥadīth. Those dots under those letters, as you know, those of you who read Arabic, there's like a sin and a صاد. So how do you articulate that in English? You put a dot for the harder version of that letter. So instead of sin, for the S with a dot under is a صاد, the ta with the dot under is a ta, the H with the dot under is a ha. So mus with a صاد, طالح al-Hadith, muṣṭalaḥ, muṣṭalaḥ. So muṣṭalaḥul Hadith is Hadith terminology. That's what it's called. So the scholars, what they did is all of those 6 different categories that we talked about previously, they are part of Muṣṭalaḥul Hadith. I know they're showing up over there. I need to take it over here. It's just one extended screen. There we go. Okay, so Muṣṭalaḥul Hadith. This, inshallah, we won't go too deep into it, inshallah, because we're actually going to spend the entire next module on it. It combines all of those sciences, so you'll see some effects of jarh and ta'dil in it. You'll see some aspects of ilal al-hadith. You'll see some aspects of history, all of those things, inshallah. We're just going to skip talking about this because this was supposed to be in a day on its own, and then we would have led into hadith terminology, but we're going to do that right now. So there's no need. Before that, let's look at a very general overview of the development of hadith after the Sahaba until the crystallization of mustalah. What does this mean? We're going to look at just a very brief timeline. What happened after the Sahaba until the crystallization, meaning when mustalah was considered complete, that's around the 900s. So you have from before 100 all the way up to 900. A very, very brief overview of that, inshallah, and then we're going to go into the deep dive of Muṣṭalaḥ al-Hadith, inshallah. So now the era of compilation, it kind of starts around 100 Hijri. Now I know it says 100 to 200. Compilation of Hadith is not limited to this time period. What I mean by compilation is when Hadith is starting to be written down. Even before this, as we have seen, Abdullah bin Amr bin al-As, he had a book of Hadith. And there were other individuals who wrote down hadith. But what we're talking about here is trying to gather as many as you can into one book. Really documenting hadith is what we should call it. Not just writing down hadith, documenting hadith, trying to switch over from the oral transmission to a more written transmission. This kind of starts around 100 Hijri. So the tradition is that Umar bin Abdul Aziz, he was a Khalifa from 99 Hijri and he passed away in 101 Hijri. So you often think that he had a huge Khilafah because, he's the second Umar and all of these different things. He only led for, 3 years, right? 99, 100, 101, he passed away. That's 3 years only. But he did a lot in that period of time. And it is said that he brought a lot of justice back to some of the injustices that was going on in the Ummah. Another thing that he did is, it's a very famous statement. Imam Bukhari, in his Sahih, he quotes him as saying, "Inni akhafu durus al-ilmi wa dhahab al-ulama." I fear that knowledge is going to become extinct and scholars are going to die. I'm scared because I'm seeing these great muhaddithin. They used to, have all these hadith in memory. And this is an oral tradition. It's passed down. That's how hadith was passed down traditionally. It's orally. And as we said before, writing was a crutch. If you wrote down hadith, it was kind of weird because your memory should have been strong enough. But he was seeing the opposite taking place. People's memory is starting to get weaker. And he's noticing people are not learning hadith the way they used to. So he made a complaint. He's the Khalifa. And he sent this letter out to his governor, Ibn Hazm, and he told him that I need you guys to start collecting hadith. So he gathered the very great muhaddithin of that era, and among them was Imam Zuhri. It was Imam Zuhri, considered one of the greatest muhaddithin of all time. He is one of those Amirul Mu'mineen fil Hadith. So he was instrumental in this as well. So they started documenting everything they could, whatever they could find. The hadith of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whatever the Sahaba said, even the major tabi'een, they're just collecting everything they could. The Imam Zuhri, you'll find him a lot in many of the chains of narration. So this is when it starts, and it stretches actually meaning what's called asru tadween, or the time period of documenting hadith. It starts from 100 Hijri, and there's a difference of opinion how long it lasts. Some say it lasts until Imam Bayhaqi, who passes away at 458 Hijri. So 100 to 458, the documenting of hadith. And some say it stretches even longer to the death of Imam Ibn Asakir, who passes in 571, a little bit more. Whatever the case is, this is considered the golden age of hadith compilation. This is where pretty much all of the major books of hadith are written in this time. Bukhari, Muslim, there's the 6 books, Musnad Ahmad, pretty much everything you can find when it has the sanad in the book is going to be compiled in this era. Now, what does it mean that the golden age of hadith, or the era of compilation? What it means is after this time period, people completely switched over to a written transmission of hadith. Like in today's time, if you want to find a hadith, is your first option to go and listen to a shaykh? No. You just type it in on Google, or go to sunnah.com, or more traditionally, you open up one of these books. So this was not the case before. Before, you would go to a shaykh and listen to the hadith. That's how you would find out about hadith. So that switch over is that era. So it took that much time for all of the hadith to be documented. By the 500s, we could say, all of the hadith that we have today has been written down and documented. You will not now find a hadith that has not been written down, unless the hadith of jinn that I was telling you guys before, that was not documented. That's an oral transmission. But this is the switch over from oral transmission into the written transmission. This occurred in this time period, but it starts at 100 Hijri. So the command to collect hadith by Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, this occurred in his Khilafah. The compilations in the very first era had hadith, statements of Sahaba, statements of Tabi'een. It was just all collected together. There wasn't really trying to make a book like Sahih, or arrange it according to Salah, Zakah, Som, Hajj. They weren't trying to do that. They were just trying to write everything. And so some of these compilations included, Imam Abu Hanifa has a book of hadith called Kitab al-Athar. So he passes away 150, very early on. Sufyan al-Thawri, he has a Jami', a book of hadith. He passes away 161. Muwatta Malik, maybe some of you have heard of Imam Malik's book, is very famous, Muwatta Malik. He passed away 176. All of these are occurring. We still study Muwatta Malik in today's time. And these books are available. Kitab al-Athar, you can still find Abu Hanifa's book. The Jami' of Sufyan bin Uyayna, Musannaf Abdul Razzaq, although he's a little bit past 200. Musannaf of Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shayba, 235, and others. This book here, the last one, Musannaf ibn Abi Shayba, is a great source for the statements and fatwas and fiqhi views of Sahaba. If you would like to see, okay, what were the differences that the Sahaba had in fiqh? They had differences. So it's a misconception to think all of the Sahaba were just following one madhab or one way. And then somehow the madhabs came in and differed everything. Those differences started with the Sahaba. And you can see them in this book. It's very large, over 20 volumes. Right? And you can still purchase it today. There's no translation, unfortunately, but it's in its Arabic form, and you can still benefit from that. So this is what occurred in the very beginning. Then we move on. The era of the development of the sciences of hadith, 200s to the 350s. So in that first era, you won't find any book on Muṣṭalaḥ al-Hadith, or hadith terminology. Muṣṭalaḥ means hadith terminology. No one wrote a book specifically on hadith terminology until the 300s. But the scholars knew the terms. So what you'll find is in the books of hadith, like Bukhari or Muslim or other books, you'll see them using the terms. Like he'll say, this is there's a break in the chain here, or there's a corroboration there, and they'll use the actual terms that we still study. But no one made like an actual book, like a book form, like you could just pick it up and study the principles of hadith. It was a language that the muhaddithin learned, and it was passed down, but they never thought to compile it into book form. They were busy compiling just hadith in general. So in this era, what happens, this is the golden age of hadith, right? So the first era is just compilation. We just started to write down hadith. And this is more specific. This is where Bukhari writes his Sahih, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, all in the same era here. Bukhari passes away. Anyone know when he passed away, which year? Hijri? 256. And so Imam Nasa'i, we saw in that list, 303. So he's among the latest. So around 250 to 300. That's the 6 main books are compiled in this era. Most of the major compilations were made in this era, although there are some before, like Muwatta and the book of Abu Hanifa and those things. Now, Musnad works were compiled in this era. What's a Musnad work? Some scholars, like if you open up books of hadith, you probably would imagine that they are arranged according to topic, right? Like if you open up a book, you would expect, okay, let me look at the hadith about salah. So you have a whole chapter about salah. Let me look at the hadith about business. So you open up the chapter of business, about nikah, chapter of nikah, etc., etc. That would be the logical thing, right? And when you open up Bukhari, that's how it is. But before that, there was another genre, another way to compile works. This was very common, and it's called a musnad. So what they do is they didn't compile according to topic of the hadith. Actually, if you read a musnad work, you will have one hadith about like iman, the next one about nikah, the next one about jannah, just random order. Like you will not find an order if you try to read the texts. The order of those hadith books are in according to the sanad. So they would arrange chapters according to the sanads. So they'll have all of Abu Bakr's narration in the first chapter. So it's going to be random. They're all the narrations of Abu Bakr. You're not going to have like all salah and stuff like that. This is whatever Abu Bakr narrated. Second chapter, the chapter of Umar. Everything that Umar narrated. Third chapter, the chapter of Uthman, Ali, then the Ashara Mubashara, then the family of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, then the Muhajirin, the Ansar. So they go according to those chapters. So it was not according to topic. It was according to individual. That's a musnad work. And many were compiled. Has anyone heard of any musnad book before? Anyone know of musnad something? Musnad Ahmad? It's still available today. And it has almost 30,000 hadith, which is like 4 or 5 times larger than Bukhari. It's enormous. Around 27,000 hadith in Musnad Ahmad. And it's still available today. You can buy it, maybe 20, 30 volumes. And this is a musnad work. So don't think you can just read Musnad Ahmad and like find all the hadith of salah. It's not going to be like that. There are some scholars, I believe, what they did is they took all the hadith and put it into chapter format. But the original Musnad Ahmad is not built that way. It's built according to Sahabi. And inshallah, next month, we will talk more about types of books in hadith. We're not going to really deal with that now. We're going to deal with hadith terminology. Then over there, we're going to talk about, okay, there's this type of book, that type of book. What are some of the names of books? What are some authors? And what do they do in their books? We'll do that next month, inshallah. Then after the musnad works, they were very common. Something you would think, like, because I guess we have the precedent, we know about the Sahih. So we're like, oh yeah, it's a book of Sahih Hadith. No one thought to do this before. No one ever compiled a book of only Sahih narrations. So Imam Bukhari was the first ever to do this. And there's Imam Ibn Hajar in his commentary on Sahih Bukhari, he says there's a few reasons why he did it. One was his teacher Ishaq bin Rahway, he was on that list of the scholars. He told him, why don't you just compile all the Sahih narrations? So then gave him the clue, the idea. There's another reason, and he had a dream, like 3 times he saw Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I believe there was one dream where he saw Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he was fanning things away from him, like bugs tried to, or flies or something were trying to get near. but they couldn't get near his body because Imam Bukhari was fanning them away. So he went to some people who could do dream interpretation, and he said, I saw this dream, and I was protecting Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam from flies and stuff like that. So they said that you will protect his sunnah from being tarnished. And so that gave him the courage to compile only Sahih narration. He was the first ever to put only Sahih in one book. Before that, people they would just put all the Hadith together. Right? So it would be Sahih, Hasan, Da'if, all kinds of Hadith in one compilation. He was the first ever to do this. And then his student, Imam Muslim, followed. So he has his own version as well. But Imam Muslim is not on the same level as Imam al-Bukhari. Imam Bukhari's book is the most authentic book in the world after Quran. Quran is the most authentic book that you can ever find, and then Sahih al-Bukhari. Not even amongst Muslims, but in the whole world, we have pride that this is the most authentic book you can find. Practically everything is Sahih in the book. All the narrators are of the highest level, and Muslim as well. So that's the Sahih works, Bukhari and Muslim. Then the Sunan works. Sunans are books that are arranged according to the fiqh chapters. So you'll start off with tahara, purity, like wudu, ghusl. Then you'll go into salah. Then maybe fasting, zakat, hajj. Then you go into nikah. Then you go into business. Then you go into government. All of those are hadith. They're arranged topic-wise. So you have scholars like Imam Abu Dawood, Imam Nasa'i, Imam Tirmidhi, Imam Ibn Majah. Those four are the four major Sunan works. We're going to go into them later, so don't try to write everything down. And it's everywhere on the internet as well. This completes the 6 major works. 2 Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, and 4 Sunans. Sunan of Tirmidhi, Sunan of Abu Dawood, Sunan of Nasa'i, Sunan of Ibn Majah. And when people say the 6 books, this is what they're talking about. Right? This doesn't mean that there's no other books. There's so many others. There's so many other Sunans. Daraqutni has a Sunan, Darimi has a Sunan, they're still available. So many different books. But these were given extra importance for various reasons, inshallah, we'll talk about later. And they just became very famous. So in our seminaries and the madrasas, usually you'll hear about the last year is called Dawratul Hadith. Dawratul Hadith meaning the year of just going over all of the Hadith. And we go over these 6 works mainly. There are some other works we look at as well. We look at Muwatta Imam Malik, and there's different versions of that. And we look at Imam Tahawi's book on Hadith as well, Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar, and then various other works. But the main thing that you'll see in most of the traditional seminaries, they're studying all these 6 books. And then they get the ijazas in them, and then they narrate them. So it's a whole thing. It's quite in-depth as well. All right, so then this is the golden age of compilation of the Hadith. And this is where the majority of the famous works take place. Then you have the Ulūm al-Hadīth phase. As I was mentioning, the principles of Hadith were not formulated until later into books. They were known by scholars and utilized by scholars. So if you read the Hadith works, you will come across these principles. And that's why it's not necessarily the best thing for us, if we don't have the knowledge, to just open up Bukhari and start reading everything. Because he's using terminology. He's using certain things. You need to have a background to read Bukhari. It's not just a book. If it's reserved for the last year of maybe a 7-8 year course, it might not be the best thing for us to start out with. It's a very intricate book. And it is stated that Bukhari used to love indicating. So he wouldn't say things very clearly. Sometimes he just indicates towards it. And I remember when we were studying, there was something Bukhari, he just says that, Shu'bah summarized this hadith. And that's all he says. He just indicates towards something. And if you look at the commentaries, there's like 20, 30 pages on what Shu'bah actually did regarding that. But he just indicates towards that. So if you really want to understand Bukhari, you have to read a lot. And one of the greatest works that was compiled much later by Imam Ibn Hajar, people say it's a masterpiece. It is a masterpiece. It's his masterpiece called Fathul Bari. Anyone heard of Fathul Bari? Fathul Bari? No one? Okay, mashallah, Fathul Bari. Fathul Bari is Imam Ibn Hajar. He was like the second Bukhari, if you will. He passed away in 852. Bukhari, 256. So Ibn Hajar, we'll talk about him in the next slide. He did a commentary on Sahih al-Bukhari. He had a group of scholars. His students were like top level muhaddithin. Like he wouldn't just teach normal beginner students. His students were already top level muhaddithin, and he was the biggest muhaddith of his era. But what he would do is he would write a commentary on Bukhari, and then he would have it copied by scribes, and then every one of the major muhaddithin gets it, and they would review it, they would critique it, they would add more, they would do all this. So he would review it, and then it took him like almost 2 decades to complete. And this commentary on Sahih al-Bukhari is like 20 volumes. It's very large, and it's an absolute masterpiece. There's this hadith of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he says, "La hijrata ba'da al-fath." After the conquest of Makkah, there's no such thing as hijrah anymore. Hijrah, you're going from Makkah to Medina, the Muhajirin, the Ansar. You get a lot of reward for doing hijrah. But after Fath Makkah, there's no more hijrah because Allah has given strength to Islam. You don't do hijrah anymore. So we cannot do hijrah really anymore. So Imam Shawkani, who's this Yemeni scholar, he says about Fathul Bari, La hijrata ba'd al-fath. Meaning he uses the same hadith and he basically uses it to talk about Fathul Bari. Meaning, once you start Fathul Bari, you never go to anything else. Once you read Fathul Bari, there's no hijrah from that. This is the book, and it's like a masterpiece. But anyway, the Sciences of Ḥadīth are compiled in this era. So now scholars, what they're doing is they have the major compilations of Hadith, and what they're now trying to do is like, okay, let's take all these terms that the Hadith scholars use and put them in one spot so that students can learn them easily. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to read Bukhari and understand what he's doing. I need to know his language that he's speaking. He uses some terminology, otherwise you're going to be confused. So what they started doing is writing these down. Also, commentaries on Hadith works were written. Like I just mentioned, Fathul Bari, it's a commentary. That did not happen in the first few hundred years. No one used to comment on Hadith like that. They used to just record Hadith. Now people are like, okay, what does this Hadith mean? Let's write about this Hadith. They're starting to write commentaries. And then there was a certain scholar, his name was Ibn Salah. Before him, there was a lot of works on Hadith, but once he wrote his book on Hadith, on the terms of Hadith, Muṣṭalaḥ al-Hadith, it became so famous. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just accepted him. He was teaching Imam Bayhaqi's book. He used to teach in Syria and in Damascus. And there was this very famous madrasa. It's called Madrasa Ashrafiyya. It's still there, but no one really, I don't think people teach there anymore. It's like a museum, I think. But it was a madrasa specifically for Hadith. People like Imam Nawawi taught there. Imam Nawawi used to teach there. But before him, Ibn Salah used to teach there. So he used to teach his book of Imam Bayhaqi called As-Sunan al-Kubra. It's a really large book of Hadith, and it establishes the Shafi'i madhab. So like maybe once a week, or he took some time to dictate to his students the terms of Hadith. And they would study this book of Hadith, but they needed to learn Hadith terminology. So they'd say, okay, once a week, for example, let's get together and we won't do Sunan Kubra. I'll just tell you about what is Sahih, what is Hasan, what is Da'if, what are these different types of Hadith. I'll do that to you guys once a week. So he would just tell them. He had his notes and he would read it out to them and they would write it down. It's just notes, like kind of like what we're doing, but obviously on his level. You guys are writing down, the teacher is giving to you. After he was done, it just became super famous. They started publishing it. Well, they didn't have publishers like we do. They didn't have a printing press. People started copying it. It started getting so famous. It spread everywhere. It wasn't like he wasn't trying to write a book. He just gave them notes. And his notes became so famous, it's known as Muqaddimah Ibn Salah, the intro of Ibn Salah. Has another name. But then after his time, people they didn't try to write a different type of book in terminology of Hadith. They were just like, this book is practically perfect. Some people would turn it into a poem, right? The same book, the contents, they would turn it into poem form. So you can memorize a poem, and in Arabic, Imam Iraqi has a 1,000-line poem, and he takes the contents of Ibn Salah and makes it into a poem. And there's other people who did a commentary on it. Some people summarized it. All of these happen. Remember in the very beginning, I told you I'm getting a lot of the etiquettes from Imam Nawawi's book. That book is a summary of Ibn Salah. It just became the book in Hadith, the masterpiece of Hadith. And even in today's time, students study this book in the seminaries. And so this is what was happening in this time. Of course, people are doing commentaries and other stuff, but Sciences of Hadith is, getting a lot of traction. All other works follow the method of Ibn Salah. This is very brief about terminology. We can go into more depth, but and then the perfection in Muṣṭalaḥ, which occurred from the 600s to the 900s. Scholars continued to comment and develop on Ibn Salah. So they added more terminologies, they added more chapters, they went in more depth, found more examples, and did more for that. And sometimes maybe they found like an error in Ibn Salah, or they corrected something there. And then the last thing we'll talk about is Imam Ibn Hajar. He passes away in 852, but kind of all the way around the end. What he did is he was an absolute master of hadith. There was this one great muhaddith, and in the previous, he passed away I think like 5 years ago. His name is Sheikh Shu'aib al-Na'ut. So Sheikh Shu'aib al-Na'ut, he was a Syrian scholar, and he was very proficient in hadith. You can find his research, researchers, they print hadith books. His name is everywhere. So many books of hadith he's done research on. And people in today's time, they're still doing research on hadith. They don't compile their own hadith collection. They do research on previous works. So someone asked him, who is the greatest scholar amongst your favorites, among the earlier scholars and then the latter scholars? So he said, among the earlier scholars is Bukhari, and the latter scholars Ibn Hajar. These are considered like the top scholars in hadith, Bukhari and Ibn Hajar. Ibn Hajar is much later. He's not like Bukhari. He's different. But he was an absolute master in Sciences of Ḥadīth. Your mind would be boggled to see how much works he has written, just encyclopedias upon encyclopedias on hadith. It was very amazing. What he did is he looked at Ibn Salah's work, and he saw that these are just notes. He didn't really intend for them to really be a book. Let me reformat everything. I'm going to put it in a different order. I'm going to make it more easy. I'm going to make sure every term is, there's no overlap between terms. Every term is clear. Every term is, easily understood. So he wrote this very concise book. It's called Nukhbatul Fikr. And he wrote the commentary on it, which is called Nuzhatun Nazar. After that, people started accepting his work a lot. So now in the seminaries, you study Ibn Salah and you study his work, Nuzhatun Nazar. Usually they might study Nuzhatun Nazar first, and then Ibn Salah is more hard. Ibn Salah is a little bit more difficult. It's a really amazing work. And that kind of crystallizes hadith. Now the terms of hadith are absolutely clear, and you have a definitive language which the muhaddithin speak with. And this is the work that I am kind of summarizing when we get into hadith terminology. Nuzhatun Nazar. Alhamdulillah, I've had the opportunity to teach the book as well, and I've kind of taken some of the terms from there. Of course, we're not covering all of it, but we're kind of summarizing what he said, and we're going to talk about that inshallah.